There we are. All right. Cool. So, welcome back to Crystal Fridays. If this is your first time here, um, we do some programming, live coding for the Crystal language, the Crystal programming language. You can find it here at crystal-lang.org. So we do some live coding every Friday, 10 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. And this is kind of a chance for me to learn and teach at the same time. So I am fairly new to Crystal. I think probably been doing it for um, 2 or 3 months on and off, and then actually seriously writing Crystal, Crystal in anger, maybe 3 or 4 weeks or so. Um, so I'm really not just aware of the language, not just interested in the language anymore, but actually writing Crystal for real, taking the ideas that I'm learning and actually building them in to my knowledge base, so to speak. Um, so, if you are interested in learning Crystal, go over to crystal-lang.org, like I said. Click on install, and it's fairly easy to install whether you're on Mac, Linux, or Windows. So just follow the instructions there. And then come back and click on learn. So this is a great reference. It's actually great to go through step by step as well. Um, but I come back to it. I mean, if you've seen previous Crystal Fridays, I come back to it all the time. But just in my day to day, also, I come back to this and remind myself, like, whatever, how to do a switch case statement and how to do, I don't know, union types, type inference, whatever it may be. This is like kind of the Bible of Crystal, so to speak. Um, so yeah, I would recommend you come and check that out. It's just a cool language. The syntax is pretty straightforward. I would say it's kind of pretty close to Python in terms of how easy it is to read and how kind of easy it is for your brain to parse it and really understand what's going on without having to go back to this book 50 times just to read like a 25 line program or something like that. So it's got that going for it. And then technically, from a technology perspective, it's really good in terms of large scale sustainability things like type safety. Um, it's easy to code review as well. It's got a good dependency system, so you can pull in third party libraries. It's very easy to break your code up into multiple files. So there's no really crazy like lookup rules for how you do a require. It requires the keyword to pull in other files. So there's no crazy lookup rules like that. You basically do a require and you say, what's the file? Is it, the file in the current directory or one directory up or whatever it is? So it's just require the relative location of the file that you want to bring into yours. Um, so, I mean, that kind of thing is nice. And then again, from the technology perspective, it's a compiled language and it compiles down to machine code with the whole underlying Crystal subsystems in it. So, standard library, garbage collection, and the concurrency stuff. And the concurrency stuff is another awesome story. I come from Go, the Go language, and Go has this concept of Go routines, which are tiny little threads that are smart enough to not take up tons of resources when they are not needed for that thread. And it also has this thing called channels, which is a really easy and intuitive way for those Go routines to communicate back and forth. So I'm really used to that. I really appreciate that style of concurrency. And Crystal has something very similar. So it has fibers and channels. Fibers are the same thing is these tiny little threads that grow and shrink and only use what they really actually need. And then the channels are the channels. They are how the fibers communicate. So it's got that going for it too. It's a fast Ruby-like language that can really take advantage of modern systems. There's still some work to go before it hits 1.0, but the way that it is already shaped up to be has shown that it can shape up to really continue to shape up to be a really great contender for not only systems programming tasks, but also for web development. So really encourage you to check it out. Even if you don't, if you're here, you're going to learn something about Crystal anyways. So let's get into it. In the past, I have been working on this project called cprox. So cprox is just a bunch of API calls, 3 API calls, that let you do URL shortening. So at the core of this thing is basically a key value store and then a REST API on top of that key value store. A REST API on top of that key value store that basically just does URL forwarding. So you can create a new URL code with a URL associated with it. And that's just a set in the key value store. You can delete, so that's deleting the key and the value. And then when you do a get/forward and then you put the code in, that will do a lookup in the key value store and find out what the URL is for that code, and then just return an HTTP 301 to forward you on to whatever that URL is. So diving into the code a little bit for some more background, we're using this library called Newmite. Newmite is really just a on-disk database. So you can see I did Newmite new, and I said I want the database binary format file to be in the current directory, and then it's going to be called cprox.db. So Newmite just manages that whole thing. It kind of reminds me of like the key value store equivalent of SQLite. Does all the work for me, and I love it for that, basically. So if you go down, it's really, really simple to use. It really just looks like a hash map. So there's one example, that's a read. Going down here, that's a write. And then that's a delete. So it's like, without knowing anything about Newmite at all, if you saw this code, I mean, it's pretty easy to read. This is a lookup. If you come from other languages, that's generally the syntax that you would see, that you would use to do a lookup in a hash map. Or in Python, it would be a dictionary, or in Go, it would be a map, whatever. The names all differ, but it's the same concept. It's key value. And this is made possible in Crystal because the Newmite library allows you to override this bracket operation. And it actually also allows you to override the bracket equals operation. So what Newmite has done is it's overridden the bracket operation over here to do a lookup on the disk-based key value store format that it's created. And then down here, it's overloaded the bracket equals operation to do a write to that disk-based key value format. So this kind of thing is just super nice. And then of course delete is delete. So it does a delete on the key value storage system, underlying file storage system. So I mean, this is just one example of the stuff that's just really nice to have when you're learning and writing a new language. So let's move on. I mentioned the key value store. I mentioned we're using this Newmite library. And we're also using this Kamal library to do all of the HTTP stuff. So, get slash, that gets the home page, the root of my server. We've got this do, and then we've got this end. This is called a block. And again, it's kind of like English, get the home page or the root, and then do this when the root gets hit by the browser or curl or whatever. And then we've got a bunch of code. The code is, what actually gets done. It's the route handler. So I'm going to get into what this stuff is. And then at the end of the day, we do a render. Render is render. It's what it sounds like. And if you're coming from other modern languages, render is rendering a template. You probably know that already. And I covered templates last time. So go check out my YouTube channel. Or if you don't know what the YouTube channel is, check out my dev.to blog. And just click on any one of these Crystal Fridays. And you'll see this series called Crystal Fridays. And just click on the second one here. And you can just scroll down to recordings and click on YouTube. So that's the playlist. Sorry if that's a little obtuse, and I'm going to make that a little bit better. But that's where it is for now. So please check that out. The last episode, the one last week, that shows off how to use templates. And templates are really powerful because they have Crystal code embedded into the HTML. And actually this .ecr stands for embedded Crystal. So it's super cool. Super cool how those work. I really encourage you to check that out because it's an awesome tool to have in your tool belt. So, all right, let's get to it. What are we going to do today? So, all of this code that I've written here is completely untested. So not the best thing in the world. So, I started pulling some code out. It's kind of hard to test these routes. I suppose I could, and maybe we'll get to that today. But as it is, it's kind of hard to test these routes out just from like nothing, from knowing nothing about anything really of the Kamal library. So instead, I'm going to pull some code out, start by writing tests there, and then we'll go from there after we get a feel for how the tests are. So we're going to bite off a small piece and then go from there and start biting off bigger chunks as we go. So I did a little bit of research on testing already. Again, I went to the Crystal Lang /reference, and there is a testing section down under the guides. So it's Crystal Lang /reference /guides /testing.html. So I was really pleased. I was super pleased actually to see that there's nothing to download if you want to start doing tests with Crystal. You don't have to figure out like a third-party library to do testing for you. You don't really have to figure out like how to use anything even. You go in here. Crystal has a built-in spec module. I honestly haven't even looked at this documentation yet. I looked at this and it immediately made sense. So I have some experience in testing. I have some experience in behavioral driven testing and this RSpec style as well. And if you don't, you can go check out RSpec. You can get a little bit of a feel for how it works. There's tons of videos to read. But honestly, if you do not do that, you can still most likely understand how this works because it's almost like English. So here, describing arrays, and then do this, all of this stuff. Ooh, well, you get the idea. Do all of this stuff when you're describing what an array should do. And then describing what the size method should do this. And honestly, like, how could this be any clearer? So array, the size method on array, it correctly reports the number of elements in the array. Like I saw that and like that was my research. It's like I don't research much for these screencasts ahead of time purposely because I want to show how easy or hard it is to learn Crystal, and then I want to show sort of my thought process. And this time it was really easy to show my thought process because I read English. I read English words. You know, the size method of array, and the hardest thing to know is the hash in front of size is the crystal nomenclature for, it's a method. So it's a method on the array object. So the size method correctly reports the number of elements in the array. And then we go down here and we actually do the test code. We say an array of 1, 2, and 3. Again, this is pretty familiar syntax if you know JavaScript or Python or Ruby, of course. A lot of other scripting languages have something like this. So we're doing a array of integers. When you call dot size, that should equal 3. So, again, a slightly hard thing is EQ. If you're not super familiar, you might not know exactly what EQ stands for. But these are pretty little things in the grand scheme of writing Crystal tests. So honestly, if I can do it, you can do it. If you're looking to start up with this new language. Going down a little bit more, it gets a little bit more complicated. Now we have more tests, and we also have something like this. So this is actually saying list or array of int32. So just to break this down, int32 is a type. So it's probably kind of what it sounds like. It's an integer, and it is 32 bits long. So this is kind of where the machine level features, I guess, of Crystal come up to the surface. So you could actually say I want a 64-bit integer. You can go all the way down to 8-bit integers. And then, you can do 8, 16, 32, 64. So it's the powers of 2. And that lets you get really deep into how big, how high do you want your integers to go, and a little bit into performance and binary layout and stuff like that. But honestly, in this case and in many cases, just you can do int32, you can do int64. It's not going to make a huge difference in your Crystal code. So we've got a list of int32s. What this is saying under the hood is this is an array that the compiler doesn't know the type of. So it doesn't know what kinds or what is the type of values that can go into that array. And we're clarifying here. We're saying it should be only int32s that can go into the array. So we've got this whole thing. This is saying an int32 array. Calling .empty with a question mark. So that is a method. You can have question marks at the end of the method. That's a cool convention because you're saying, is it empty? And now that should return true. So this is the same. It's like almost like English. Same thing. Empty, but with something in it, should be false. So fairly straightforward. And I'm literally just going to stop there. And I'm going to go and try to figure out how to do one of these. So when I ran Crystal init to start with, it automatically created cprox spec and spec helper. So spec helper seems a lot less helpful than cprox spec, despite the name. Spec helper is not helping me very much, but this seems to be the right place to go because it looks just like the code. Kind of looks like a skeleton of the code I saw in the website, but also it has a to-do that says write tests. So that's pretty helpful. That's super helpful. That, it's not helpful in terms of what should I write, but it's helpful in saying this is where you write the test. So let's go back and compare a little deeper to what is in the website. So it looks like I should require spec. That's the first thing. So we're going to copy that over. And I'm guessing that I need to require the actual functionality that I'm going to need to test. So here it didn't do it because you don't really need to require arrays. Arrays are built in. So I'm going to do a require. And then we're going to go up a level and then down a level into this source directory. And then I'm going to test out this get kvps file. And I'll show what's in there in a second. So just jumping out of the tests and just for real quick, what I did in order to start testing something is I had this code, this commented code, and this was saying I've got some key value pairs that is a list of a two tuple. So let me dive in a little bit deeper. It is a list, an empty list of these pairs of string and string. So each element in the list would be two strings. So that's why I say it's a two tuple. Two means the number of elements in the thing, in the pair. Tuple means a list of two strings that can never be changed. Well, you can change the strings, but you can never add an element to make it three or remove an element to make it one. So it's two strings in every element of the list. And then I'm going through every element in the database and I'm adding it to the end of the key value pairs, list. So I took all of this commented stuff, deleting that, and I moved it into this file. It's the exact same code here, but I wanted to break it out, because it's way less code now in this route. That makes me happy. But B, now I have a function to test. So that's pretty cool too. So let's go in here. And the first thing we should probably do is create a new database so we can pass the database in to get KVPs. So database equals who knows. And let's just hold off on what the database should be. And it gets a list of key value pairs. And maybe I'm going to want to break this out into like describe get KVPs later. But let's just keep it all in one for now. Let's bite that piece off later if and when we need to or want to. So actually, I'm going to just put the database inside of this block because I don't know, maybe I want other databases somewhere else. And we are going to just call get KVPs. Actually DB, and should be, let's see, how do you do these matcher things? Oh, should equal. And what should it equal? No idea. We can get rid of this. So, okay, let's dive a little deeper. What I really want is I want to have a list in memory. I want to put that list into the database. And then I want to call get KVPs to get the list back out. And then I want to make sure it gets the same exact list. So let's call it list of ints is 1, 2, 3, 4. Still don't know what the database is, but then what should come out is list of ints. Okay, let's go one step more. Going back into here, here's the database. So let's do this. We're just going to name it something different. So cproc spec database equals, let's see, cprocs get kvps test. And before I forget, I'm going to clean up the database. So I need to make sure the database is deleted at the end of this function. At the end of this block, the test block. So now I'm going to need to go through the list of integers and add it to the database. So I think I can do dot each. And so what I'm doing is I am going through every element of the list, every integer in the list. And now I am passing that iterator a function, what's called a block. So so I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for the database, but basically the block takes an integer here, and then I do something with the integer, and then I'm done. So this, now I just realized, this is actually not going to be a list. I need to make this a dictionary because the database is a key value store. So I need to put a key and a value into my database. Now, dictionary. I forgot how to do that. So we're going to go in, and I'm pretty sure this is called a hash map. And I think hash map is in the API docs. So I'm going to click on spec module because that's going to take me to the API docs. And I'm going to scroll all the way up, and then I've got hash map. Is it under hash? Whoops. There we go. Yeah. A hash is a collection of key value. Oh, similar to a dictionary. So do I have dictionaries in here? No. Let's stick with this. Hash literals. Okay, let's do that. I think hash literals is the way to go. That's what I was missing. So it was in the reference. Hash is a generic collection of key value pairs mapping keys of type K to values of type V, created with curly braces. That's right. I forgot about this. All right. So let's do a, let's say hash equals, and then we'll do the curly, and then we'll do 1 is 1, 2 is 2, and 3 is 3. I'm getting real creative here, as you can see. 4 is 4. So we have a what is it? English to integer mapping. So if you need to know what the English word is for, or if you need to know what the integer that represents the English word, as long as you want to know that integer for 1, 2, 3, or 4, I got you. I got you with this hash variable. Pretty cool, right? All right, so now it's going to be hash.each. It's going to take in the English word and the integer for our closure, for our block. And English is going to equal integer. So I shouldn't actually call this a closure. That might be a little confusing. This is good. This is a block. So kind of like a callback. So hash.each is going to pass my block, my callback, every single English letter or English word and integer in the hash. So it's going to pass 1 to 1 map, 2 to 2 map, 3 to 3 map, 4 to 4 map. But it's cool because I don't need to do the for loop or the while loop to actually make that happen. So pretty happy about that. And now inside of that block, we're going to put the we're going to put the key value pair into the database and get KVPs is going to return a list of string tuples. So down here, it's not the same. So it's not going to return the same hash. It's going to return a list of the key value pairs in it. So I'm going to write an expected list equals the same deal as, where was it? Here. So it's going to be a list of that string. And we saw this in the example, by the way, too. So on the website over here, we saw that, where was it? This. We saw the list of type. I'm doing that here too. And here. So I was doing it over here, and now I'm doing it over here. So we've got our expected list. And now we're going to add not only the English word and the integer, so not only the key and the value to the database, we're going to add it to the expected list. So again, yet another thing that I just realized. This thing is going to return a string tuple. And that is because this database, the NumMite database, only accepts strings for the keys and the values. So you can see not only is my test evolving, but my understanding of the exact code that I wrote last week, that's evolving too. So it's kind of like another good argument for tests. It's code, it's documentation that's written in code that I can actually run to make sure that I got my own code right. So that's good. So we can't have this. We can't have a string and an integer. We have to have two strings. So I'm going to do English to Spanish mapping. No. And if there's any Spanish speakers watching, I am pretty sure I got this spelling right. I only know how to say it. If I didn't get it right, either comment here if you're watching live or put it in the YouTube comments. And I also apologize profusely if I spelled it wrong. So we've got a hash that is a tuple of string to string. And I'm sorry, is a hash of string to string. And now our callback is going to take an English string and a Spanish string. And it's going to do English and Spanish. We're going to put the English in as the key, Spanish in as the value. And our list, our expected list, is going to be each tuple is going to have English as the first element of the tuple, Spanish as the second element of the tuple. And so we're putting the Spanish into the expected list. Now, this is where the money is actually made. When I call get KVPs, it should get the list of the string tuples. It should get the list out. So the list should represent the hash. So I've actually pre-created the list that I expect to get out. So the list that get KVPs gets out should equal the expected list. And didn't clean up the database yet. I didn't figure out how to do that yet. So let's just figure that out later and we'll manually delete it for now. All right, so how do we run these things? Somewhere in here. Is it crystal space something? Crystal space spec. All right, let's just type that in. I got to open up my terminal. Just a shameless plug again. WSL2, this thing is working great for me. I keep expecting something to go wrong, but it's really pretty solid. So just wanted to mention that again because I'm, what am I, 5 weeks or 4 weeks into using Windows as a main development machine. I'm still happy. So let's see what happens. Get KVPs. Unexpected token should. What did I do wrong? Where do they do a should? Oh, they do a dot should. Well, there's some kind of magic there because as far as I know, true does not have a dot should on it. So, well, let's just see. Let's see what dot should does for our get KVPs. Interesting. It started up the server for some reason. Interesting. So I am requiring spec. I'm requiring get KVPs. I think I saw something else in here that might help. Spec files must end with _spec.cr. You can compile and run specs from folder trees, individual files, or specific lines in a file. Maybe I can just try running the specific file for now and seeing if that does not start up the server. So let's run crystal spec. Send the spec and then cproc spec. Huh. All right, well, in the interest of continuing on here, let us, oh wait, no. Maybe this is the problem. All right, so cproc spec is requiring spec helper. Spec helper is requiring cprocs, and then cprocs is calling kamal.run. So two things. One, obviously, we shouldn't be, this is kind of like the main. I don't really want to, well, I do want to test the main, but I also don't want to test the main. Just my personal preference and what I consider as a best practice. Main should basically glue together all of the other functionality that I'm using, that I have written. So all of this code here, like this is the stuff that should be probably pulled out and put into other files. And then an integration or end-to-end test or both, that should be the thing that actually goes ahead and tests this out. So like an integration test would be, going ahead and requiring cprocs and then starting up another thread or another fiber to do GET requests against this thing, making sure that like the JSON that gets put in is also returned using an HTTP client, all that good stuff. And that I'll get there, but I'm just not there yet. Like I'm barely learning how to write specs, so I'm not going to get there yet. So I'm going to instead focus on the unit tests of the individual functions. So to do that, I am going to not, I'll just comment it out. I'm going to not import cprocs from my spec helper. And I'll figure out what spec helper is later. I think I saw something about it in the docs, but I'm not sure. So I'll figure that out what that is later. But for now, I'm just not going to require cprocs. And let's go and run our file again. Describe cprocs. All right. Undefined constant cprocs. I think maybe we need to describe get kvps because that's the actual thing we are testing. I think it was doing describe cprocs because spec helper was importing cprocs and cprocs itself is a module. So instead, let's see, maybe we can describe get kvps. Wrong number of arguments for get kvps. Oh, maybe you have to describe a module. Let's go over here and see. Where's the very, very beginning? Okay, that's describing a class, I think. Let's see what array is. Yeah, array is a class. So it's kind of seems like you have to describe a class. Maybe you can describe a function with no arguments. I'm not really sure about that. But we can go back to module. We can do module cprocs and end. And let's just tab all this stuff in, indent it. And let's see what we got going on now. Oh, I got to change it as well. I got to change it in my spec. What do we got going on now? Undefined constant numite. That's because I forgot to import it. Let's see. This. Gotta require it. I gotta get used to the nomenclature. It's require, not import. I'm used to import from the Go world. So I gotta require it. Get kvps should be equal to expected list. And what did I do there? Here. Undefined method get kvps for top level. Maybe I need to do cprocs : get kvps for the module. Maybe. Unexpected or expecting token const not get kvps. Interesting. Describe cprocs. Can probably get rid of that to do. Something about modules or something like that. Something about requires. So let's see here. Somewhere in here is modules. If this is adhering to RSpec's interface, you can pass a string to describe instead of the object under test. Oh, okay. Let's try that. Describe get kvps and maybe I'll try that, and then maybe I can take the module out here, and then that will let me, well, that will let me do this without me figuring out what the cprox module cprox stuff is all about. So let's take this out as well. Alrighty, and hey, thank you, Trevor Bramble. That's very helpful. All right, so Trevor, you saved the day. Let's see if Crystal Spec works. Cool. And then over here, I did my get KVPs here. This is just dot, not dot dot source, because it's, again, it's like relative to the file, so it's right next to it. And then down here, I call get KVPs. I'm assuming this is just a global function because it's not inside of a module. So I think Crystal build will just work. I got to do main.cr. Looks to work. Sweet. Splitting out the implementation is a fine solution. Yeah, I think I'm doing it right. It's just that one thing is like, I don't know what the best practice is, because the actual the actual main file, and just for reference, by the way, my main file is just for convenience so that I can do Crystal build main. The main file is just there to require in the real main file. So like this is inside of a module, which I'm assuming is the best practice, because when I did Crystal init, it literally spit out this file that started with module cprox. So I think that's best practice. So if it's doing that in the file that Crystal made, I wonder if I'm supposed to do it in this file that I just wrote. But for now, I'm just going to roll with it because I don't know. I don't really know what to do. I got to research more. But this reminded me. I saw this file here. That is the database. So I got to go over to my spec. I got to do this to do. So we're going to go check out Numite. And I forgot the GitHub URL for it, but luckily we can go over to our shard file, which is the dependencies, by the way, if you're unfamiliar. Shards is the dependencies system that Crystal uses. It's the Crystal name for dependencies, or shards. And there's also a CLI called shards as well, and it reads this file, the shard.yaml. And because I always forget this dependencies URL, I put it up here, and we're going to go check it out. So let's see if there's a way to delete the database file. Delete, garbage collect, delete deletes a key, garbage collect, shutdown. Maybe shutdown is what does it. Let's try this again. All right, cross your fingers. Is it still there? No. How about let's delete this and start again. Please don't be there. Oh, it's still there. We might need to actually delete it. Like delete it with an OS call. Let's see if we can figure out how to do that. OS. Oh, I gotta go to the API documents. OS. Remove. These don't look like they're OS level things. Maybe file. Okay, a file instance represents a file entry in the local file system, temporary file, constant summary, constructors. Okay, well, we can delete a file at path. All right, and these are class methods, so I don't have to create a new file instance. So let's try it. We're going to go back into our spec and we're going to do this. DB file name equals that. And then we're going to do file delete db file name. And I don't remember if I have to require file. Do I? I'm not sure. Let's just see. Oh, I have to do file dot delete. I forgot. All right. Is it there? Hey, it's not there. All right. So we have a test. Pretty cool. I'm like really tempted now to figure out what is the deal with that module thing. Let's just try it. Why not? I might have to do cprox dot get kvps. To be honest with you, I did read a little bit about modules. I'm still not 100% sure how they work. I know they work in tandem with requires, so I'm not quite there with modules yet. So I'm going to just play around real quick. I'm going to try cprox dot get kvps in here, and we're going to see if it works. I do know that the call to get kvps here, it doesn't need that cprox in front of it because we're already in the module. And I also know that you can split, you can put module cprox in multiple files. So you can split up an actual like logical module into multiple files and just add on like classes and functions and all kinds of stuff into that module across a bunch of files. But this is not in the module, so I might have to do this. We'll see. Please work. All right, I'll figure this out another time. Let's instead go and try to split out some more code and write another test. We've got about 15 minutes to do it, and let's go for it. So we've got this split out. This stuff is, maybe this is the way to go. Yeah. So let's go and try to split out, I don't know, maybe we'll split out like getting the URL and the URL code as a tuple of strings. And then otherwise we can return either the tuple or nil. So maybe like this, I'll just comment out this stuff. We can do like URL strings equals get what should I get? URL and code, and where it looks like we're gonna have to pass the env here. And now strings is going to be either a string or a nil. So if you're unfamiliar with Crystal, this is a union type. Strings can either be a string or a nil, and you actually have to write code to check. So if strings is nil, then I'm going to put this. I'm basically just going to return this error code. I think there's a better way to do it with an error, an HTTP error code. But for now, I'm just going to return the string. So else, now if I do the else, it definitely means the compiler is going to guarantee that this strings variable is not the nil. Instead, it's a string. Actually, this is going to be a tuple of strings. Also, by the way, if you're unfamiliar with Crystal, also, I don't need to do this. Crystal will figure it out. I'm just doing it for my own clarity and sanity. And it also helps with teaching. So I hope that it makes it a little more clear for you too. So URL equals strings 0, and then URL code equals strings 1. Now, there's something I've always been curious about if I can do this. I'm going to try that out another time. This is kind of called destructuring. So it's kind of telling the compiler, if it works, it'd be cool. the compiler knew that URL was supposed to be the first element in the tuple and URL code the second. I have no idea, so we're just gonna stick with what we got, or stick with what we know. So we're gonna do this, and we're gonna redirect. And let's do one more thing, because you see we're doing this .as string, but I want to have this function make sure that it gets a string back so that we can just do this. Delete that, whoa, delete that string and delete that .as string. That'd be great if we could do that. Okay. So we're going to do a new file. Let's call it URL and code.cr and def get URL and code. It's going to take in the environment. And here I'm not specifying the types, by the way. I just don't want to, honestly. Oh, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, Trevor. Oh, cprox hash get KVPs. All right. Stop the world. Let's see if that works. I've been really, really curious about how to do this. So I wish you were still here. I could say thank you to you. But hopefully you'll see this on the YouTube and receive my thanks there. Alrighty. Let's try that. cprox hash get KVPs. I'm not sure. It's greening it out, but I don't know. Let's just go with it. Oops. Maybe the compiler's wrong, or the VS Code is wrong. I don't know. Wow, that's worked. Okay, does Crystal Build work too? I almost forget that. Undefined method. Okay, so maybe we have to do it there too. Huh. Index.ecr. Huh. Nah, I'm gonna have to research more about this. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. But I do know I have to really get a good understanding of modules before I commit to really using them, I assume, in the right way. So I'm gonna just go back to what I got. I'm gonna get some more test coverage instead. All right. So let's get our URL and code. I'm gonna copy this over first. And then we're gonna go if URL nil or URL code nil. We're gonna return nil. And now remember I said that I want this to return strings, a tuple of 2 strings. So now I need to go if URL is a string, or if not, URL is a, actually, how do I check if it's a actual string? Yeah, is a string. All right, so it looks like I gotta pass it with parentheses. I noticed this here. If not, URL is a string, or not, URL code is a string. We're gonna return nil. Otherwise, we're going to return a tuple of URL as a string. Is that how you do it also? As a, maybe not. As a, how did I do it over here? Oh, just as. That's right. Real code as string. Typo. And then we can end all the things. Okay. And still, if you saw, I think my first Crystal Fridays episode, I tried to make this all fancy with functional programming so I didn't have to do so many ifs and elses. I still think there's a better way to do this that's more Crystal native. I haven't read enough code to find what it is, but I don't know that it's the, fancy functional programming thing. So yeah, if you have a nicer way to write this, if you're watching, put it in the chat, or again, like put it in the YouTube comments, because I feel like there's a better way. I'm not 100% sure. So we got that going on for us. We need to require URL and code. And heading down here, we can do this. Uncomment that. And let's make sure we're returning the URL is the first element in the tuple. URL code is the second element in the tuple. That's what we got. URL is the first that we're returning. URL code is the second that we're returning. Let's first make sure it builds. Must be, instead it returns nil or tuple string. What did I do wrong? Maybe I have to do this. Sometimes I get this wrong. Do I have to do this? What I usually like to do is when I get the types wrong, I try to put the actual explicit type as close as possible to where I think the code should be returning that type or creating that type. So if I get an error in here, I'll figure out what the compiler thinks that I'm actually returning from this. Error, a method must return tuple string or nil, but it's returning a nil class or a tuple string. I think maybe I have to do this. Yeah, a nil under a nil lowercase is an instance of the uppercase nil. The uppercase nil is a class nil. So I think this might work. Yay, it worked. Okay. So I'm almost out of time. Let me just start with the specs for URL and code, and then we will continue from there. I'll either continue from there offline, like during the week, next week, or if I don't get a chance, we can just do it next Crystal Fridays. So either way, we'll just see how it goes this week. So we're going to first require our URL and code. Another typo. That's what I get, typos, for when I'm rushing through to try to get something built. So now we're going to do another describe, get URL and code, and we're going to do a it gets a string URL and a string URL code. And we're going to do a do and then ends. So let's see. I might have pulled this out at the wrong abstraction level. So we've got this env.params thing going on. Somehow I have to pass this thing an env dot params somehow. So I have to figure out a way to like mock env somehow. Let's just like put that aside and assume like, yeah, there's a way to mock stuff in Crystal. I bet there is, but I'm not sure. So I'll research that another time because I have 1 minute. So instead, let's just say mock env equals mock env.new some url.com and then some code. And then get URL and code mock env should equal some url.com some code. So really that's like basically what it should look like. Assuming I have this mock, I should be able to just call this, pass the mock in. The mock should be able to do, env.params.body, blah, blah, blah. And then it should just return 2 strings. So like, it's that simple. Just assuming I can figure out how to do a mock env. So I will be ecstatic if there's a way to do a really cool, like built-in, preferably, or third party, but I'd prefer to have it built in. If there was a really cool way to do mocks like that, oh man, I would be even more in love, I guess. So, but with that, I'm going to take off for today. This has been another episode of Crystal Fridays. As I expected, I had a great time. I learned a bunch about Crystal. Hope you did too. Yeah, I mean, the testing in Crystal, I just continue to be like really happy with how these things look and how these things work just in general. And testing was no exception. I didn't even have to get a third-party library. I didn't even have to research anything about like what are the best testing libraries. It's built in and it's pretty full-featured. So again, really just go check out crystal-lang.org/reference. And that's the place to go. Like you can just search for specs, click on testing, and there you go. And then one more thing I just remembered. If you go to arschless.com, click on other things I do, and then go down, you'll see Crystal Fridays. And this is a better place. You won't have to remember as much. Just go to arschless.com/about, scroll down. You'll see this recordings on YouTube link. That'll take you to the playlist, the Crystal Fridays playlist. And pretty soon you will see the episode from today up on here. I'm just going to get it from Twitch and put it up here, and it'll be all processed and ready to go by the end of today. So with that, I am going to say goodbye for today. I hope everyone is healthy and well and staying safe and making sure that you wash your hands. And if you've got extra time, I really hope you go and check out Crystal. Super fun to write, super fun to play around with. It's a new language. I think it's going to be really popular and really widely used. So this is a good chance to get in on the ground floor, so to speak. That's kind of what I'm doing. So yeah, go check it out during the week. I will see you back next Friday at the same time in the same place. So 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 week from today. On twitch.tv/arschless. And again, if you need to go find out where this stuff is at, you can go check out my website, arschless.com/about. All the details are right here. All right, everybody, take care. See you next Friday.